Okay, that one's going to have a little bit of a delay to that live video, I believe. So if you, just so you know, anyone who's watching, there's a little bit of a delay. Okay, so let me count my Folsom team. Mrs. Shank, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And do we have Barbara Barrett? Oh, there she is. I see a black screen. There she is. Okay, I have all my team, Vinla. Do you have all yours?
Hello.
I do. I have all mine here too.
I think, let's see, we've got 2 young ladies posing as Barbara Barrett. So whoever is, will the real Barbara Barrett please log in?
I'm working on changing my name.
Yeah, no problem. Understood.
We have all our jurors.
Oh, jurors. Okay, we have Heather Rivers, we have Jonathan Berkey, and we should have one more.
Need one more juror.
One more. Let me see who it is. Should be Adam.
I can let you know. Let's see.
And David, I made you host already, and we are live right now.
I didn't get, oh, my makeup's, oh. But yeah, where are we? One more jury?
We were waiting for Adam.
Oh, okay, Adam. Got it. I think he was just finishing up from round 2. And we are still, and the judge is, okay, he's logged in, but he's blanked out right now. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll wait just a minute.
Okay. And Folsom defense, I am gonna mute myself and turn off my camera, which is gonna hide me completely, but I'm still watching.
I think Adam's here. Adam, are you able to show your face?
Yes, I just clicked on a button that said show non, so I see Adam there, but
Oh, he just left.
wonder if
Maybe, yeah, give him a minute to,
Might be having some technical difficulties.
yeah. Okay, it looks like Adam's back on. There he is.
yeah, there we are.
Hey.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty good. I have 101. And so, welcome back, campuses, for this round. This is round 3. We've accomplished 2 rounds already. Round 3, Roseville as a prosecution, Folsom in the defense. We have our bailiff on, who bailiff is, oh, right, Folsom bailiff. Okay, thank you very much. Both campuses, myself, we have our directors, Mrs. Shank and Mrs. LaRock. We have all of our jurors, and our judge is blacked out until he is, till we open up court. So without further ado, let's proceed with round 3. Bailiff?
Yes. Oh, this matter of this case is State versus Barrett. Barbara Barrett. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's a little low.
Okay.
You may just have to just lean into it a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
There we go. That's better.
All right. All rise. The Supreme Court of Sacramento County is now in session. The Honorable Judge Merritt presiding. God save the state and this honorable court. Okay. Are we doing that yet?
Judge, you're muted right now.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, everyone. Let me back that up. I got a little bit moved. All right. The matter before us today is a criminal trial for murder. And the first-degree murder is defined as the killing of another person with malice aforethought, whether express or implied. And malice is the wrongful intent to injure another. And a bedrock principle that we have in the United States legal system is that any accused is innocent until proven guilty. And the state alone bears the burden of proving that guilt. That means that if the prosecution proves that it's more likely than not that the defendant committed an act that was a crime, that's not enough, and a jury must acquit and find them not guilty. However, it does not mean that the state has to prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt. It only has to meet its burden by proving beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a doubt that a reasonable person using reasonable rationale would find in any case based upon the evidence before it. And with that in mind, I would like to ask first if we have the defendant present for the determination of the plea. Is the defendant present?
Yes.
I have an indictment here on a first-degree murder charge, and the first order is to determine what that plea is. So, Ms. Barrett, what do you plead?
Not guilty, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Barrett. Counsel, are there any motions in limine or pretrial motions that need to be heard?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Well, then we're going to proceed with opening statements, and I would like to ask everyone to please keep your fingers off the button and stay on mute while the other attorney is speaking. And we're going to start with the prosecution. Is the state ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
And your floor is all yours.
May it please the court, Your Honor, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Catherine Orchard, and this is my co-counsel, Joshua Ewan. We represent the state of South Carolina in its case against the defendant, Mrs. Barbara Barrett. Betrayal, scorn, hate, humiliation, retaliation, revenge. Some of the stronger words of the English language, wouldn't you agree? Some of us may even have had some experience with them. But have any of you ever killed in response? Have any of you ever contemplated the most villainous form of vengeance and then followed through with it? No, you haven't. Let me tell you a story of someone who has. But I must warn you, it's not a happy story. It's salacious and gruesome and tragic, and proves beyond a doubt that hell has no fury like a woman scorned. Let me take you back to the night in question, December 18th, 1988. John Barrett, the defendant's husband, was late returning from work. Before he even has time to make himself comfortable, to set down his briefcase and remove some items of clothing. The defendant starts nagging him about his tardiness. The two had been growing apart, and the subject of divorce had been recently brought up. Mr. Barrett reiterates his desire to separate from the defendant and is planning to move out that night. The two continue to argue until the housekeeper, Lee Porter, informs them that dinner is ready. They carry the fight into the dining room where it escalates. Eventually, Mr. Barrett tells the defendant to leave the room. She stands up to leave, but pauses at the door and utters the following: "You'll be sorry." Mr. Barrett finishes his dinner and retires to the living room, where he finds the defendant lounging on the sofa, sipping a glass of red wine. He heads for the opposing sofa and pours himself a small glass of scotch, but he never has a chance to drink it. The argument continues over the content of a letter regarding the victim's intention to divorce the defendant. Unable to face the humiliation of divorce, the defendant pulls out a gun and shoots Mr. Barrett in the arm. He then begins to flee and she shoots him in the back of the leg. This act of bloodlust still isn't enough, so she pursues Mr. Barrett into the next room, where Lee Porter witnesses the gruesome scene. When the defendant rounds the corner, she finds him face down on the floor. She plans to finish what she started, so she proceeds to fire 3 more shots, 2 to his back and 1 to the back of his head, the cause of death. She then drops the gun by her dead husband's head and locks herself in a bathroom until found by the responding officer. The defendant has entered a plea of not guilty to the charge of murder. This plea will not be substantiated by the evidence. To prove this, 3 witnesses have agreed to testify against her. Joe May, the pathologist who performed the autopsy on the deceased, will testify as to the condition of the body as a result of the multiple gunshot wounds and the significance of the angle of entry of those bullets. We will also hear from Lee Porter, who has been employed by the Barretts as their housekeeper for the past 6 months. Not only was she an eyewitness to the murder, but she will provide evidence regarding the premeditation that went into this horrific crime. And finally, Officer C.M. Cheney, who is the lead investigator at the scene of the murder and who ascertained the defendant's signed confession, will also testify as to his firsthand observations. He's disappointed by the victim's choices. He was having an affair. He wanted to leave his wife. But that does not mean he deserved to die. A woman scorned is a powerful force, and revenge is a powerful motivator. After the enormity of the evidence provided against the defendant today, we feel there is no doubt that you will find the defendant guilty of the murder of her husband.
Thank you very much. Defense counsel?
May it please the court, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Amy Hansen, and these are my co-counsels, Claire Roberts and Joseph Wolin. On December 18, 1988, Mr. Barrett said he was leaving Barbara. Barbara was arrested for murder. Seems like an open and shut case, right? We will prove things are not that simple. The issue in the case today is how the defendant, Barbara Barrett, was battered at least 3 to 4 times a year by her husband throughout their marriage, living through each one just because she believed she knew and loved the real, sensitive man beneath that she'd married. One night, a couple weeks after the beginning of another violent beating cycle, her husband came home and out of nowhere said he was leaving her. She was so confused and upset, she left the room in order to think more clearly. The deceased followed her into the room with a belt in his hands, the same belt, in fact, that only a week before he had severely beaten her with. She believed he was going to strangle and kill her. Barbara does not remember anything after that until the police had taken her away, and you can imagine how bewildered she is. Having never been read her rights by the officer questioning her, she is immediately shamed and pressured into giving a confession. She is then permitted to call a lawyer, saying later that she never would have even talked to the police if she'd known she didn't have to. We want you, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to see with great clarity how the events of that night really unfolded. In the first exhibit, the police report made by the detective C.M. Cheney shows that the officer did a quick and sloppy job, not only in the report, but also in the diagram of the house, which he also created, leaving out valuable details. The diagram of the body and the autopsy report, both made by Joe R. May, have several inconsistencies that cannot be ignored. Barbara's invalid confession should be disregarded completely because the officer questioning her did not read Barbara Barrett her rights at any point during questioning, which is illegal. Finally, Lee Porter's criminal record of petty larceny is an act of moral turpitude proving that she is a completely untrustworthy witness. Our first witness, Dana McGuire, has a master's degree in psychology and specializes in cases of battered women. Having conducted research on countless women, including Barbara, she will walk us through the psychology behind the life of a battered woman and will leave you with no question about Barbara's mental state toward and relationship with Mr. Barrett. Our next witness is Barbara Barrett herself. This will provide you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, a chance to get to know this battered woman and understand just a tiny fragment of what she has gone through in her life. She will describe what it was like living with Mr. Barrett, as well as specific details of how things happened that tragic night. In the end, this case is centered around the heartbroken, battered woman who needs time to heal after the pain of losing her beloved husband. She finally saw Mr. Barrett for who he was, a dangerous person who is not only capable of killing her, but seemed to have been trying to do so all along. In order to help Barbara Barrett recover from the pain of being abused by her husband for years and move past her battered woman syndrome, the defense is pleading not guilty.
Very well, prosecution. You may call your first witness.
Prosecution would like to call Joe May to the stand.
Do you affirm that the evidence you shall give to the court and jury in this trial shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Good morning, Mrs. May. How are you?
I'm good.
Please state your name and occupation.
My name is Joe May. I'm a doctor with specialty in pathology.
Are you a certified pathologist?
Yes, I am.
Do you often perform autopsies for the Milton County PD?
Yes, I do.
Did you perform an autopsy on John Barrett?
Yes.
Could you please describe the condition of the body?
The body was that of a well-nourished, well-developed, middle-aged man. No pre-existing abnormalities were apparent.
Were there any indications from the autopsy that the deceased was intoxicated?
No.
What was the deceased wearing?
He was wearing a white button-down shirt, a tie, blue-gray suit pants, black socks, and black wingtip shoes.
Where were the bullet wounds located on the body?
There was one to the front of the left arm, one on the back of his right thigh, two on his back, mid-right, and one on the back of his head.
Could you please describe the path of the bullet wounds?
The wound to the front of the arm was through and through. The wound to the back of the thigh was through and through. The two wounds to the back were at an approximate angle of 45 degrees from a horizontal plane. The wound to the back of the head was also at a 45-degree angle from the horizontal plane.
What is the significance of the fact that the two wounds to the back and the wound to the back of the head was at a 45-degree angle?
This is consistent with the bullet fired while the deceased was lying face down on the floor.
Did you find any powder marks on the body?
No.
What does that indicate?
This means that the muzzle of the firearm had to be more than 2 feet from the gunshot wound.
If Barbara had to be more than 2 feet away, that indicates it is unlikely that the shots were in self-defense.
Yes.
Is it possible to determine in what order the shots were fired?
No.
What was the cause of death?
The shot to the back of the head while the deceased was lying face down on the floor.
Thank you. Your Honor, we have no further questions.
Thank you. Defense counsel, do you have any questions?
Yes. Good afternoon, Dr. May.
Good afternoon.
So you drew and labeled the diagram of the body, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to submit the diagram of the body into evidence?
Objection, Your Honor. It was drawn by C.M. Cheney in proper extrapolation of the stipulated facts.
Overruled.
You previously testified that there was one gunshot wound that entered the front, correct?
Yes.
This means the deceased had to have been facing his attacker, correct?
Yes.
But this means the deceased couldn't have been running away from the attacker, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You examined the body, right?
Yes.
Was the deceased Mr. Barrett wearing a belt?
No.
Was Mr. Barrett wearing any jewelry?
No.
Not even a wedding ring?
No.
Okay. You created, oh wait, I already said that. Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, no, I didn't. You created an autopsy report, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to submit Exhibit 4, the autopsy report, into evidence.
Any objections? No objections, so admitted.
Okay. Just for our personal knowledge here, can you please explain how you tell the difference between the entrance and the exit of the bullet wound?
Yes, the bullet wound to the front of the arm was through and through. Then the bullet wound to the back of the thigh was through and through. The two bullet wounds to the back at an approximate angle of 45 degrees from the horizontal plane, and so was the wound to the back of the head.
Objection, non-responsive answer.
Sustained. Can you ask your question again, Amy?
Just for our personal knowledge, can you explain how you tell the difference between the entrance and the exit of the bullet wound?
Oh. Can you state that again? I'm confused.
Can you please explain how you tell the difference between the entrance and the exit of a bullet wound?
I cannot.
So you're saying that you've trained for how many years and you don't know the answer to your job?
Objection, Your Honor, outside the course of the witness's statement.
Sorry, she's testified that they came from the back and then from the front. She has a total right to ask about how she knows that to be true. You can answer if you can answer.
I don't know how to answer that.
Your Honor, lack of personal knowledge.
But she was trained. That's her job. I can move on to the next question though.
Move on to another question, counsel.
So just to clarify here, a gunshot would never create a gash, right?
No.
Okay. So there was a tear of the skin across the lower portion of the cranium, right?
Correct.
So that therefore couldn't have been made by a gun, correct?
Correct.
So the cut on the back of Mr. Barrett's neck could be the sign of a struggle, right?
I could not accurately answer that.
You previously testified that the two gunshot wounds to the back and the gunshot wound to the back of the cranium are at 45-degree angle, right?
Correct.
You previously testified that this was consistent with the bullets being fired at the deceased face down on the floor, correct?
Correct.
If we were looking to make a 45-degree angle, Barbara Barrett also could have been shooting up from the floor, couldn't she?
It is possible.
Dr. May, please read line 31 in your autopsy report.
It is not possible to determine in which the order were shots.
Therefore, you testified right there in your autopsy report that the numbering of the shots in your diagram of the body is arbitrary?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much. Dr. May, you may be excused and step down. Prosecution, do you have any other witnesses?
Yes, prosecution would like to call Lee Porter to the stand.
Please raise your right hand, Miss Porter. Do you affirm that the evidence you shall give to the court and jury in this trial shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Could you please state your name and occupation?
My name is Lee Porter, and I've worked all my life as a housekeeper.
How do you know the defendant and the deceased?
I am employed to them as their housekeeper.
How long have you worked for the Barretts as your housekeeper?
I have worked for the Barretts for about the last 6 months.
What are your hours?
My usual hours are from 2 p.m. till 10 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday.
Was Mr. Barrett ever abusive to you?
No, he was never abusive. In fact, he was actually nice to me. Sometimes if dinner wasn't to his liking, he might throw a fork or something, but it was never directed at me. And he would always apologize profusely.
How did Mr. Barrett treat his stepkids?
He loved those kids very much. He was a very doting stepfather.
Did you ever witness a beating or see evidence of abuse?
I never saw Mr. Barrett hit Mrs. Barrett, nor did I ever see any bruises or evidence of abuse.
Did you overhear any of their arguments?
I did hear them arguing from time to time, and one time I heard a scream, but I didn't see any evidence of abuse.
Were you working your normal shift on December 18th, 1988?
Yes, I was, 2 to 10.
Did you witness anything peculiar earlier in the day on December 18th, 1988?
Oh, I sure did. I heard some strange noises coming from the backyard, like a car backfiring or something. Very similar to the noise I heard from when Miss and Mrs. Barrett shot Mr. Barrett. Well, soon after hearing the noises, I saw Mrs. Barrett come into the house using a door she never uses. And get this, she had a gun in her hand. I should have suspected something then.
I'd like to hear more about the night of December 18th, 1988. Was Mr. Barrett so?
Yes, he hadn't been drinking or anything.
Did the defendant appear agitated before Mr. Barrett arrived home?
Yes, she did. She had been pacing the house, complaining about how Mr. Barrett always came home late.
What occurred after Mr. Barrett arrived home?
He made himself comfortable, like he always did. He placed his briefcase down and then went into the living room to take off his jacket.
Could you tell us what happened in the living room?
Mr. and Mrs. Barrett talked for a while. They both seemed really upset when I came in to let them know that dinner was ready.
What occurred while you were serving the Barretts their dinner?
Mr. Barrett announced that he was leaving Mrs. Barrett that night. Mrs. Barrett started to get hysterical and was uttering stuff like, "You can't do this to me." Mr. Barrett was very calm and went on eating his dinner. Because she was being so crazy, Mr. Barrett asked her to leave the room, so she went into the living room.
Did anything stand out to you in their conversation?
Yes. Oh, yes. Something did stand out. As Mrs. Barrett was heading toward the living room, I heard her say, "You'll be sorry," or something like that.
What happened after dinner?
The next thing I heard were these loud bangs, exactly like the sounds I had heard earlier in the day. I ran into the living room and couldn't believe my eyes. Mr. Barrett was limping into the dining room, holding a bloody piece of paper in his hand. I could see that both his arm and his leg were bloody. The look on his face was one of pure terror.
Did you see the defendant with the gun?
Yes, she came running into the dining room with a big gun in her hand.
What happened next?
I was so terrified by the sight of the
Objection,
blood.
narrative.
Overruled.
I was so terrified by the sight of the blood and the sight of Mrs. Barrett with a gun that I ran from the house and hid.
Did you ever return to the house?
Yes, I finally worked up enough nerve to see if I could help Mr. Barrett.
What state were the defendant and the deceased in at this time?
Mr. Barrett was dead. There was blood everywhere, and Mrs. Barrett had locked herself in the downstairs bathroom. She was crying. She kept screaming, "I love him. I didn't mean to hurt him."
Did you alert the police?
Yes, I alerted the police as soon as I could. They arrived about 10 minutes after I had first run the house.
Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
Yes, a previous employer of mine once accused me of stealing $100 from her. I didn't do it though. It was such a scary time. The prosecuting attorney convinced me to enter a plea agreement to stay out of trial, so I had to serve probation.
Thank you. We have no further questions, Your Honor.
Defense counsel, do you have questions?
Yes. Good afternoon, Ms. Porter.
Good afternoon.
You've worked for the Barretts for a while now, correct?
Yes,
So you are familiar with the house, are you not?
yes,
According to your witness statement, you said that after you saw Mrs. Barrett with the gun, you ran through the kitchen and out of the house, didn't you?
yes.
Your Honor, I would like to enter the diagram of the house into evidence.
Any objections? No objections, admitted into evidence.
You did not draw this diagram, right?
Correct.
And there is no back door on the diagram, is there?
Correct.
And you say in your witness statement that you ran out of the house and through the kitchen. So how could you have possibly done that if there is no back door?
I don't have an answer for that.
So, Miss Porter, are you sure that there is a back door at all? Because it's not on the diagram, is it?
Correct, but that could have been a mistake.
You said that you were scared of Mrs. Barrett, didn't you?
Correct?
And you were hysterical and crying when you were met by the police officer, weren't you?
Yes.
And you also previously testified that you ran out of the house and then returned 10 minutes later before the police officer arrived, didn't you?
Yes.
So you returned to the house so soon afterwards, without a police officer, no less, claiming that you were terrified of Mrs. Barrett, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. It never states that she was terrified of Mrs. Barrett.
But she just said that she was.
She's right. Witness just said she was terrified of her. So she's just repeating that. You can ask your question.
Thank you. You were arrested for a crime of petty larceny back in 1979, weren't you?
Correct, but I didn't do it.
But you've been involved with criminal activity before, right?
Correct.
And you were convicted, correct?
Correct.
Objection, asked and answered.
Judge, can you repeat that? You're on mute.
You're muted. I couldn't hear you, Your Honor.
Just do that. It's already been established that she was convicted of the crime. You don't need to ask her that question anymore. That's in the record. You can ask other questions about it, but you can't ask that question again.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
You have previously testified that, and also you said it in your witness statement, that even if Mrs. Barrett did have bruises on her, you weren't looking because it was none of your business. Aren't I correct?
Correct.
And you've also testified that you've only worked for the Barretts for only 6 months now, didn't you?
Correct.
So even if Mrs. Barrett did have bruises on her, you weren't looking closely, correct?
Correct.
You previously said in direct examination that Mr. Barrett was always nice to you, didn't you?
Yes.
And so, as you said in direct examination, you repaid his kindness by stealing from him, didn't you?
I don't know what you mean.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's your objection?
Oh, it's not stated in it. It's badgering the witness.
It's not badgering the witness. She's just asked a question. She can answer yes or no.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, plaintiffs or prosecution, do you have any other witnesses?
Yes, I would like to call Officer C.M. Cheney to the stand, please.
Please raise your right hand, Mr. Chin. Do you affirm that the evidence you shall give to the court and jury in this trial shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for testifying today. Officer Cheney has served his state and our country for many years. So would you please tell the court your name and occupation?
My name is Sam Cheney, and I'm 29 years old. I work in the Radio Patrol Division of the Milton County Police Department.
Do you have a family?
Oh yes, me and my wife have 2 daughters, Sarah and Meredith. They're 5 and 3 years old.
Officer Cheney, how long have you worked with the Milton County Police Department?
I've served in the force for 7 years.
And what qualifications and education do you have to be a police officer?
I earned a degree in criminal justice. That was after I graduated with highest honors from South Bend College in Haydenfield, South Carolina. I then joined the department in 1982, and I've also taken 9 hours with my advanced degree in criminal justice.
Have you ever been called to a homicide before? And what training do you have for occasions such as those?
Well, paint a second nose on me and call me a Picasso. I've been called to more homicides than my Uncle Garfield has fake teeth. He has a lot of fake teeth, my Uncle Garfield. Anyway, I've received mandatory and specialized training at the police academy. I also have a lot of experience in the field. I am adept at preserving physical evidence, taking measurements of physical proximities important to the case, and interviewing witnesses, including suspects. I also usually take statements from the suspects that night.
What are your regular hours of duty?
I work from 4 p.m. until 12 a.m., Tuesday through Saturday.
And what was your situation on December 18th, 1988?
I was patrolling alone because my partner, Ralph Simmons, had an asthma attack earlier that day. Poor Ralph. Poor Ralph. At 9:50, while I was coincidentally in my squad car in a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot, I received the dispatch to 2437 Rambling Woods Drive. I arrived at 9:57.
So what were your actions upon arriving then?
I immediately located Barbara Barrett, who had locked herself in the downstairs bathroom. She was as scared as a pig at a picnic. I was met by Lee Porter, who identified the deceased as the husband of Barbara Barrett. The deceased was lying face down in the dining room with multiple bullet wounds to his back. The guy did not look very good.
So did you draw the diagram of the body?
No, as stated earlier today, Joe May did.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. All right. So, okay, how many wounds to the body were there in all?
There were 5 wounds to the body in all.
Will you tell me where they were located?
There is one to, as depicted in the diagram of the body. There is one to the arm, one to the leg, two to the back, and one to the back of his head.
What other evidence did you document at the scene?
I tagged a crumpled letter I found in the deceased's hand. The gun used to shoot him was laying next to him. It was a .38 caliber pistol with 6 spent rounds. I also found a full glass of scotch and a half-empty glass of wine in the living room. I don't really like scotch or wine. I prefer moonshine. You know, the kind they make up in them Tennessee hills. Well, anyway, they must have had a fun night.
Oh, so you said there were 6 spent rounds. Did you find the 6th bullet?
Yes, I recovered the 6th bullet from the wall adjacent to the entryway leading from the dining room from the living room.
What did you find in the deceased's hand?
I found a crumpled letter addressed to a person named Tootsie, another woman, I believe.
Your Honor, I would like to enter the following exhibit marked as prosecution exhibit number 6 into evidence.
What is it?
The Tootsie letter.
Any objections? No objections, it'll come into evidence.
You have what has been marked as exhibit number 6 for identification. Would you identify it, please?
This is the letter that was found at the scene.
All right. And what was the date written on that letter?
December 16th, 1988, 2 days before the murder.
Interesting. So will you tell me what the deceased was wearing?
He was in business attire. He wore a white buttoned-down shirt, a loosened tie, suit pants, and black green-tipped shoes.
Your Honor, I would like to enter the following exhibit marked as prosecution exhibit number 2 into evidence. This is the scene diagram.
I got it.
Any objections? No objections, it'll come into evidence.
You have the scene marked as prosecution exhibit number 2. Would you identify it, please?
Yes, this is the diagram of the house that I drew.
Thank you. Will you please explain this to me?
Well, the house. This is the diagram of the house that I drew. As you can see, As you can see, the house was in disarray. There was blood leaning from sofa number 1 to where the deceased came to rest. The deceased jacket and belt were lying to the next to sofa number 2. Sofa and a ripped open envelope with the word Tootsie written on it was to the right of sofa number 1.
What was the state of the actor that you found her in?
She was crying and hysterical, kind of like my wife when she runs out of chocolate. Barbara was screaming things like, "I didn't mean to hurt him, and I loved him. Why did he have to hurt me so?"
Later, did you take the confession from Mrs. Barrett?
Yes, I took a confession later from her later at the police station.
What are your habits when dealing with suspects?
I always make a habit of reading those in custody their rights, once before they give their statement and another time before they sign the typed version.
So did you read the suspect her rights then?
Well, I have no specific recollection of reading her rights, but can you say that for sure that you brushed your teeth last night? Probably not, but you always do. It's the same with my habits. For some reason, she didn't want to call a lawyer, so after she gave her statement, I reminded her for the third time that she could call an attorney, and she did.
Earlier, you stated that the actor was hysterical when you found her. Did the suspect seem out of it or mentally deranged when you took the confession?
No, she seemed very sharp and all there. She fully understood the warnings and gave a voluntary statement.
Oh, one more question. When you asked her if she felt threatened immediately following the murder, when John walked into the room, what was her answer?
She said no.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Defense counsel?
Mr. Cheney, is it true that your regular hours of work are from 4:00 p.m. to midnight?
Yeah, that's true.
And yet, is it also true that on the night of December 18th, you filed your police report at 1:00 in the morning?
Yes, because.
Additionally, is it also true that your days of work are from Tuesday to Saturday?
Yes, that is true.
Do you also realize that December 18th, 1988 was a Sunday?
No, I do not realize. I do not realize that.
Well, it was. You also testified that you were not alone, that you were alone and you were not aided by your partner, correct?
Yes, because my partner
And
was
so
sick.
you have just testified that you were working on an extra day of the week on a longer shift than usual and without the help of your partner, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay. You have questioned many witnesses before, correct?
Yes.
And is it true that you can always be certain that what a hysterical person says is true?
No, you can't.
You cannot be sure?
Yeah, but you cannot always be sure.
And is it also true that Lee Porter was hysterical when she met you at the scene of the incident?
Yes, I would say that
And
is true.
you related Barbara to your wife when hysterical, correct?
Yes.
And would you consider your wife to be a dangerous person?
No.
Okay. You submitted a personal witness statement into this trial, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would like to submit this witness statement into evidence. Okay. Officer Cheney, can
Hold
you?
on a second. Hold on a second.
Objection lacks the foundation, Your Honor.
What's your response, counsel?
He established that he has created a personal witness statement and has submitted it. So I'm going to ask him some questions about it. I would like to submit it into evidence.
Any other objection, counsel?
No.
Come into evidence.
Okay. I would like you to please read line 26 of your witness statement, starting with, "I have no specific recollection."
I have no specific recollection of reading her Miranda rights, but I believe that I did not read it to her prior to agreeing to give her statement. And
Okay,
then
so is it true that you have no exact and specific recollection of reading the Miranda warnings to Mrs. Barrett?
That is true, but I make a habit
And is it
of
also true that according to your witness statement, even if you had read the Miranda warnings to Barbara, it was not read until you arrived at the station, right?
Yes.
And is it true that you just testified that while at the house, you asked Barbara whether or not she had been threatened, correct?
Yes, I would say
And
that
so,
is true.
And so even if you had read Barbara the warnings, you still questioned her before doing so while at the house, right?
Yes.
Additionally, the Miranda warnings clearly state that Barbara has the right to remain silent, as well as to have a lawyer present during questioning, don't they?
Yes.
And did Barbara Barrett have a lawyer present with her during questioning? Yes or no answer, please.
She did not have a lawyer.
Okay, and
But
okay, you stated that you drew a diagram of the house, correct?
yes, I did.
And I would like to revisit this exhibit, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Okay, and is there a back door in the house?
No, there was not.
Okay,
At least I didn't see one.
no further questions, Your Honor.
Very good.
Okay.
Prosecution, do you have any other witnesses to call?
No, Your Honor.
Then we will turn it over to the defense. Defense, do you have any witnesses to call?
I do. I would like to call Dana McGuire to the stand.
Please raise your right hand, Mrs. McGuire. Do you affirm that the evidence you shall give to the court and jury in this trial shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Hello, Miss McGuire.
Hello.
And can you please tell the court how old you are?
I am 42 years old.
And what is your area of specialty?
I am a psychologist, emphasizing on the psychological state of abused and battered women.
And where did you study in order to acquire this position?
I studied for a master's in psychology, graduating from Campbell State University.
And what were your studies focused on?
I focused on mainly the psychological strain within families, and my thesis was called Passive Behavior and Learned Helplessness in Interfamilial Relationships.
And what have you used these studies for?
I've written books on the psychology of battered women, and I've interviewed hundreds of battered women.
Your Honor, I would like to establish Dana McGuire as an expert witness.
If there are no objections, she's so established.
Okay. Dr. McGuire, when did you interview Barbara Barrett?
I interviewed her 3 times, all within 1 month after her husband's death, the earliest being 2 weeks afterwards.
And would you, in your expert opinion, consider Barbara to be a battered woman?
Yes, I would.
And what factors would qualify her for this?
Barbara would have to at least go through at least 2 battering cycles with 3 stages, though she endured many more than that, and to the point she developed a sense of learned helplessness.
And can you please explain to the court exactly what the battering cycle is?
The battering cycle consists of building tension, which then leads to extreme verbal and physical abuse on the part of the man. He then apologizes, and the couple once again becomes loving towards each other. However, the man isn't truly satisfied, so the cycle repeats.
And can you please explain what learned helplessness is?
Learned helplessness is when the woman gets to a certain point of depression and anxiety, and she gives up on trying to fight back. She loses herself of self-confidence, and she sees no reason to escape, thus tricking herself into thinking that she cannot live without the man, thus building a dependency.
And in your expert opinion, was the level of violence committed against Barbara Barrett extreme?
Yes, very much so.
And based on your interviews with Barbara, had she ever tried to harm her husband before?
No, she never had.
What then, in your expert opinion, changed in her psychological state to cause her to kill her husband?
She was continually beaten by him, yet she still thought he loved her. When he said he was leaving, she realized he never loved her, and she was heartbroken. And then she realized he was trying to kill her all along. It was just merely self-defense.
And in your expert opinion, would you say that she killed him out of anger and malice?
No, I would say that she killed him in the heat of the moment, when she realized he was going to kill her and she needed to defend herself.
And you have submitted a personal witness statement into evidence, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, I would like to submit this witness statement into evidence.
Objection, hearsay.
We're going to try this because every time I hit the space bar, it just starts making a big noise. So I'm just going to leave myself on and hopefully not interrupt anybody. What's your objection?
Hearsay. The Dana McGuire is speaking to what she thinks Barbara thinks.
Your Honor, I'm merely asking to submit a witness statement into evidence.
And that witness statement is an out-of-court statement, isn't that correct?
A what?
It's out of court. It wasn't, she's not making a statement. She wrote it down elsewhere, correct?
Correct.
Then I'm going to not allow it because it's hearsay.
Okay. Barbara, is it true that you have claimed that battered women experience lots of anger?
Yes, but only at themselves.
And wait, who is this anger directed at?
Themselves, because they feel that they cannot reach to the relationship standards of the man.
And is Mrs. Barrett paying you to appear in court?
Yes, she is.
And does this affect your testimony?
No, it does not.
Why is this?
Because I am basing my testimony off of my extensive research concerning battered women. Barbara fits into this category, and so I can answer purely off of my knowledge in this area and what I've studied. I have more money than I need, and I want to merely properly educate the society concerning this condition.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Plaintiffs, your witness. Plaintiffs, your witness.
All right. So it is true that you are being paid to testify here today, though.
Yes.
The data you collected from all these women that you've interviewed wasn't from a controlled database. You feel it's a good representation, but you don't have any other support, correct?
No.
It's not correct.
Yes.
You have other support then?
No, I don't.
Let me restate the question. You feel that all the data you've collected is a good representation, but you don't have any other support, do you?
No, I do not. I do not have other support.
Many women stay in these battering relationships because they don't have economic choice. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, Barbara, with her generous trust funds, she doesn't fit this description, does she?
As a battered woman, she does fit the description.
But not the complete description.
No, she does. She has gone through multiple stages of battering cycles.
But she is not economically or financially dependent on John in any way, is she?
No, she is not.
All right. To prove learned helplessness, there was an experiment done by Dr. Samuel Michaels, correct?
Yes.
And he conducted that on dogs, did he not?
Yes, and many other animals, including cats.
Many other animals. Well, you're willing to equate these animals with humans, with human nature?
Objection. Opinion.
She is actually qualified to make an opinion. I'll allow the question. You can answer.
Are you willing to equate the characteristics of animals with humans?
For this, I would say yes, only because we couldn't find any volunteers to do this on. And it would technically be abusement if we used humans for this experiment.
So that proves that this whole representation of the experiment is a theory. It's not a fact then.
No, it does not. It is in between. We are still working on it, but it does give an equivalent of what humans feel like.
So it's a theory, not a fact. And it's not conclusive either, is it?
No, because we are still working on it. We still have more studies to do, and it's not solid.
You interviewed the defendant for the first time 3 weeks after the murder, and only 2 more times after the initial interview. Is that correct?
Objection asked and answered, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow him to continue to probe that. Don't have to repeat everything that he's already brought out, but just move along, counsel. You can ask it.
You interviewed the defendant for the first time 3 weeks after the murder, and only 2 more times after that. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And your definition of a battered woman that you gave us was your definition, correct?
Yes, it is. But as I said, I do have a
You're
master's in
paid
psychology.
by hour here today, is that correct?
Yes.
That's $150 an hour?
Yes.
No further questions.
All right, Dr. McGuire, you may step down. Thank you very much. Defense, do you have any other witnesses?
Yes, I would like to call the defendant and Barbara Barrett to the stand.
Please raise your right hand, Miss Barrett. Do you affirm that the evidence you shall give to the court and jury in this trial shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Good afternoon, Mrs. Barrett.
Good afternoon.
Can you please tell the court how old you are?
I am 47 years old.
I understand this is hard for you to talk about, but when did you first meet your second husband, John Walker Barrett?
I first met him at an alumni function.
Did John ever come over to your house around 2 weeks before your wedding?
Yes, he did. He came over to my house to eat, but he was drunk and told me he didn't want to eat anything and asked me to fix him a drink instead.
So did you fix him a drink?
Yes, of course I did, but I fixed him a weaker one on purpose, hoping to avoid a scene.
Did he realize that you had given him a weaker drink?
Yes, he did. After he tasted it, he immediately threw it against the wall and slapped me in the face.
But did you still get married anyways?
Yes, because I loved him and I just couldn't live without him.
I know that this is hard for you to discuss, but did John ever call you on the night 8 months after your wedding?
Yes, he did. He told me that he was going to be late from work.
Did you start to worry about him?
Yes, I did.
What time did you start to worry?
Midnight.
Did you go to check on him?
Yes, I drove down to his office, but I saw his light was still on. And when I walked in, I saw him sitting on a couch with this blonde lady I didn't recognize.
Did you wait to see if you actually did recognize her?
No, as soon as I saw her, I ran out as fast as I could and drove home.
Did John come back home?
Yes, he did.
When did he come back home?
He came home 2 hours later.
Was he upset that you had caught him?
Yes, he was furious, and he began yelling that I was incompetent and stupid.
Did you try to leave?
Yes, I tried, but he caught me and started hitting me. And then when I fell down, he started kicking me.
Is that the last thing that you remember?
No, well, yes, the next thing I remember, I was in an ambulance on the way to the hospital.
Did everybody at the hospital know that you had been beaten by your husband?
No, of course, I just told them that I had fallen down some stairs because I loved John. I didn't want to get him in trouble.
I'm sorry to bring this up, but did you ever notice a pattern in the beatings?
Yes, actually, in fact, I did. They would usually run in cycles, at least 3 to 4 times a year. And sometimes they were so severe, I couldn't leave the house for days.
Did you ever have bruises from John beating you?
Yes, I had many.
Did you ever try to cover them up?
Yes, because I never wanted anyone to know what John was doing to me because I love him and I didn't want to get him in trouble.
Did you ever ask for help or seek advice?
Yes, I talked to my minister who told me that I should forgive my husband. And then I talked to a series of doctors who all prescribed tranquilizers to help me cope with the violence. Though I believe that some people may have thought that John thought I was taking drugs because he didn't know about the tranquilizers.
Is there anybody else who'd be aware of the beatings?
Well, besides the minister and the doctors, only Lee Porter, my housekeeper.
Do you trust Lee?
No, I don't.
Why don't you?
Well, because on the night of John's death, I caught her stealing loose change.
I understand that this is difficult for you to talk about, but did John tell you anything on the day about 3 weeks before his death?
Yes, he did. He told me that he thought our marriage was in difficulty.
Did you respond?
Yes, of course I did.
How did you respond?
Well, I told him that I would give up my fundraising activities for the symphony so we could try again because I just couldn't live without him.
Did it ever make you angry or upset that John was questioning your marriage?
No, of course not. I was angry at myself because I thought I had done something wrong. I thought it was my fault.
I'm sorry to discuss this, but about 1 week before he died, was John acting in a way that made you think that this was the beginning of another violent cycle?
Yes, he was acting very edgy and tense.
Were you correct? Was this the beginning of another violent cycle?
Yes, I was correct because when he came home from work, he took off his belt and began to beat me with it in our bedroom.
Were you shooting in the backyard earlier on the day of John's death?
Yes, I was.
Why are you shooting in the backyard?
Because John told me to test it to make sure it's working properly and then put it in the living room. But of course I would because I love him and would do whatever he told me to.
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained, strike that answer.
Were you the only person home on December 18th?
Yes, except for Lee Porter, my housekeeper, until John came home around 9 o'clock.
Did John tell you anything that night?
Yes, he did. He told me he wanted a divorce and that he wanted to marry someone else.
Did you respond?
Yes.
How did you respond?
I was shocked after all we'd been through together, and I was crying during dinner, so he told me to leave the room.
What did John do after you left the room?
He followed me, and he was holding a belt in his hands, and I thought he was going to choke and kill me. And I don't remember anything else until the police officer came and took me away.
Did it make you emotional or upset that John wanted a divorce?
I was only angry at myself
Objection,
because
leading.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Objection, leading the witness.
I have already established that John wanted a divorce.
I'm going to allow the question. Objection's overruled.
At the police station, did you agree to give your statement?
Only because I was just so confused and upset.
Did the officer read you your Miranda warnings?
No, he didn't. And if I had known I didn't have to talk to the police, I'd have never given my statement.
Did the officer give you a confession?
Yes, I believe he did.
Did you sign it?
Yes, I did.
Why did you sign it?
I was just so confused and upset, and I didn't realize that I had a choice.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. State, do you have any questions for the witness?
Yes, Your Honor. You have been previously divorced, correct?
Yes, I have.
You have a large independent source of revenue, correct?
Yes. But
Therefore, you did not depend on the deceased financially in any way, correct?
No, but I just couldn't live without him, and it wasn't because of money. It was just because I loved him.
But you did not depend on the deceased financially in any way. Am I correct?
Yes, but I loved him.
You were often concerned about the deceased another woman, correct?
Can you please repeat the question?
You were always concerned about the deceased and other women, correct?
Yes, I was.
In fact, you caught him with the blonde at his office late one night, correct?
Yes.
You were often upset that the deceased spent so much time at his job, correct?
Yes, but I knew what he had.
There are no official records of the beatings, correct?
What do you mean?
There are no official records of the beatings, correct? Police reports, medical records.
No, because I told everyone that I'd fallen downstairs.
Also, no one has seen these bruises that would result from these beatings, correct?
Because I covered them up, so I didn't want anyone to know.
John was sober. The beatings you claimed occurred usually happened while the deceased was under the influence of alcohol, correct?
Most of the time, but not always.
But John was sober when you came home on the night of December 18th, 1988, correct?
Yes, but
You
but he
complained
was
to
always
him when he came home, when you arrived home late that night, correct?
Can you repeat that?
You complained to him about coming home late when he arrived, correct?
Yes, but I understood why he had to
Yes.
because I knew that.
In your witness statement, you said that the deceased never told you why he wanted a divorce, correct?
In my witness statement?
In your witness statement.
Yes.
But in your confession statement, you said that he wanted a divorce because he wanted to marry another woman, correct?
I don't remember. I was just so tired and confused and upset, and I
Thank you.
wanted to.
Officer Cheney asked you if you'd like to give a statement, correct?
Yes, I believe he
He
did.
did not force you to, correct?
Well,
He did
Not-
not force you to. He never physically forced you to, correct?
not physically, no.
You poured yourself a glass of wine that evening, correct?
Well, only because I was so confused and upset, it helped me think.
You drank a glass of that wine that evening, even though you've been prescribed tranquilizers, correct?
I didn't drink the whole
Thank
thing.
you. And it's common knowledge that it's unsafe to mix drugs and alcohol, correct?
I don't know.
It's common knowledge, though. Lee Porter has worked for you for around 6 months, correct?
Yes.
You claim these beatings happen 3 to 4 times a year, or about once every 3 months, correct?
3 to 4 times a year, yes.
Yeah. Lee has never seen any beatings or bruises, correct?
Because I covered them up, because I didn't want her to know.
You've never seen any of these beatings or bruises or any kind.
Because I
Thank you.
covered them up.
You claim that the deceased was abusive, correct?
Yes, he was very.
But you never tried to leave him and only sought help 1 to 2 times, correct?
No, I talked to my minister and I talked to a series of doctors.
But you never tried to leave him and only sought help very few times.
I couldn't live without him. I couldn't leave him.
Your children adored Mr. Barrett, correct?
They didn't know what was going on.
But they adored Mr. Barrett, correct?
Well, only because he was so nice to them, but he wasn't nice to me.
you.
Hold
Your
on.
Honor, we have no
Objection.
further questions.
Objection.
Lack of personal knowledge. How is she supposed to know if her kids adored him?
It says in her witness statement, Your Honor.
Hearsay is hearsay. No personal knowledge. I'm not going to allow the question or the answer.
Okay, Your Honor, we have no further questions.
All right. Defense counsel. Do you have any other witnesses?
The defense rests.
Prosecution? Because you bear the burden? Excuse me? Excuse me? Did I hear somebody?
I'm sorry. Never mind.
All right. So Ms. Barrett, you may stand down. And both sides have now rested their cases. So the attorneys will now present their closing arguments to the jury. And at this time, the prosecution bears the burden of proof. They will go last. And so we'll ask for the defense counsel to make their closing arguments.
May it please the court and the Honorable Judge Merritt and members of the jury. Barbara Barrett has been beaten for years, robbed by her housekeeper, and abused by an officer of the law. More than anything, she wants to be treated with kindness and allowed time to recover from the immense levels of trauma that she has experienced. We have shown how the officer, C.M. Cheney, upon arriving at the scene to a traumatized Barbara, did not properly inform her of her rights and instead forced a terrified woman to make a confession. We've shown that if Cheney had truly read Barbara Barrett her rights, she would have had a lawyer present, which she clearly did not. And Cheney has testified that he has no exact memory of reading the rights in the first place. He additionally questioned her at the house before reading her any warnings and used those statements against her today. Not only that, but he did not uphold the law as he was careless at the scene of homicide and conducted his examination poorly. Because of this sloppiness, we have seen that he did not include a back door in the diagram of the house, while Lee Porter clearly stated that there was one. And thus these two witnesses are clearly contradicting each other and cannot be fully trusted. We have shown how Joe Armay clearly does not understand how to properly examine a body, as he was unsure of how to determine the difference between the entrance and the exit of a bullet wound, and despite her extensive studies. And she has clearly done her job improperly. Joe has also stated that Barbara could have been shooting from the floor, and thus we see that she could have possibly been knocked to the ground by John before shooting. The witness, Lee Porter, has admitted to hearing Barbara scream as well, possibly a cry of pain during a violent beating she received from her husband. She has also said how she ran out of the back door, while there's clearly none in the diagram, thus contradicting C.M. Chaney as we have seen before. As she is unsure of how this is possible, she is either lying in her witness statement or the diagram is obviously flawed. Lee Porter additionally has not only testified falsely against this woman, but we have shown that she has been involved previously in criminal actions for which she has been pled guilty. Regardless of her reasons for pleading so, the court has decided that she has committed this crime and there's no evidence against her doing so. Several violated state statutes can be seen upon considering this case. As we have seen, based on the actions of C.M. Chaney, Barbara was not properly treated according to her legal rights and was forced to give a confession. Based on these circumstances, and according to the state statute, Jackson versus Deno, we implore that this confession be entirely disregarded from evidence in all related questions. Furthermore, we have seen that the housekeeper, Lee Porter, has been admitted guilty for a crime of larceny, which thus involves moral turpitude, according to the statute, State versus Corn. According to this statute and State versus Millions, which say that a crime of larceny is equivalent to a crime of moral turpitude, and such crimes would prove this witness unworthy of belief, we implore that Lee Porter's testimony be completely disregarded and that the honorable judge and jury impeach this witness from evidence and all related questions. Dana McGuire, our witness, has explained how upon being continually beaten by her husband, a battered woman will depend immensely on the loving stages of the couple's marriage, while ignoring the injury caused to them and not truly recognizing the danger they are in. The state of mind is only broken when the woman realizes she was never truly loved and that her life is at risk. We have shown that this is the very position Barbara Barrett was in, beaten by her husband, and upon the realization of the danger of her situation, acting against her husband to protect her own life. And so we ask you to recognize Barbara's actions as being out of self-defense and a desperate act to save her life. The opposing counsel say that Dana may have a bias in her answers at court, but we have shown that she was merely paid to present the facts she has researched, not been bribed to make up any information. While Barbara did kill her husband in an act of self-defense, we have proven that it was not done with malice, nor was it premeditated. All of her actions were spurred out of love for her husband, and we have shown that this mentality was only changed when John told her he did not love her. The love of her life had rejected her, and she now realized the source of her pain. John Walker Barrett had been trying to kill her all along and was now going to try to do it again. John was going to initially attack Barbara and try to beat her to her death, coming at her with a belt and leaving her no choice but to shoot him to the floor. Barbara knew that if she had not done so, she would have been forever beaten until her death. It is true that she did shoot him, yet she acted upon John's provocation and violence, fighting to save her life from the man who never loved her. We want Barbara to gain relief from her pain of being abused, the pain of being legally taken advantage of, the pain of trauma and fear. Barbara has lost the love of her life, and as her world collapses around her, she asks that the courts see her not as a wicked murderer, but a poor, beaten woman who was forced to save her own life and is now in need of rest and comfort. We implore that the jury and judge find the defendant not guilty.
Thank you very much. The state would like to make their closing argument. Go ahead.
Thank you. May it please the court, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I'm Joshua Ewan. When and where? Keep this question in mind. Why are you here today? And why am I here today? Well, we're here today because John Walker Barrett's life was taken by his own wife. The court system was put in place to ensure justice. Where would the world be without it? Where would America be if lawbreakers were not disciplined for their wrongdoing? Well, the American judicial standard would be ruined. We are here today to avenge John Barrett and to show that our court system works. We strive to seek justice for those who have been silenced, We set an example for those who seek to do evil, and in this case, it is our job to redeem the life of John Barrett. I'm here today to show that Barbara Barrett is guilty of murder. Murder is the killing of another person with malice aforethought, either express or implied. Whether it be months, minutes, or hours, motive is motive, and Barbara had one. Barbara was the wife of John Barrett, who was found dead with 5 gunshot wounds. You've heard that John was a terrible person. He abused Barbara, cheated on her, but let's not forget that Barbara is the one on trial today. Let's not forget that John Barrett was a loving father, a human being, a treasured colleague. Barbara is the one on trial for murder, murder which she readily committed with malice aforethought. Well, you may believe that Lee Porter's statements can't be trusted because she allegedly committed petite larceny, but as Lee Porter said, she was accused of stealing $100 from a former employer. She was convinced by an experienced lawyer to plea bargain. However, this does not mean that Lee Porter committed the crime. She is a highly credible witness. We heard from her that earlier on the morning of the shooting, she heard what sounded to be gunshots in the backyard. She soon witnessed Barbara enter through the house through an unused door with the said gun. This clearly shows Barbara had criminal intent. During the shooting, Lee Porter witnessed John, who had already been shot multiple times, run around the corner with Barbara and her gun in pursuit. We heard from the medical examiner, Joe Armay, that 3 of the 5 wounds were to the back. John was lying face down on the ground. This wasn't self-defense. She fired 5 more bullets than she would have if protecting herself. Barbara did not stop shooting until she knew he was dead. In her signed confession, Barbara states, "He told me he wanted a divorce and that he wanted to marry someone else." The Tootsie letter was written by John 2 days before the murder, giving Barbara plenty of time to see it and plan out the assassination. The defense Lee Porter, the housekeeper, who has worked there for 6 months, has never seen any sign of beatings. There are no medical records, no witnesses, no police reports, and no solid evidence. Furthermore, Barbara doesn't even fit in with the complete definition of a woman given by Dana McGuire. A definition, mind you, that was made up by Dana herself. She had substantial trust funds and was not dependent on John in any way except emotionally. Dana McGuire herself said that the entire test on learned helplessness was theory. How can we say that a theory based on animals is grounds for conclusive evidence? Officer Cheney himself never forced Barbara to give her statement. Barbara herself said that she was not even forced. When he asked her the questions at the house, he was merely trying to understand the situation. According to State versus Thrailkill, motive is not an essential element of crime and need not be shown, although it is much harder to prove someone guilty without. We have shown you her motives. We have shown you her guilt. When she realized John was leaving her for someone else, this gave her more than enough motive. She wasn't going to let John marry another woman. She was going to kill him because she felt betrayed. The defense argued that this was an act of self-defense, but in her confession and witness statement, Barbara claims that she felt threatened when John walked into the living room with the belt. However, when asked by Officer Cheney if she felt threatened, she stated that she did not. Now, which of these statements will you believe? One she gave talking to the officer immediately following the crime, or the one taken after she had time to think about her answer? The defense claims that John walked into the room with the belt with the intent of beating her. Well, this remains unsubstantiated because John's actions were completely normal. After a long day of work, what would you do? Well, you would come home, remove your jacket, take off your belt, loosen your tie maybe. Moreover, the jacket and belt were lying on the floor together, nowhere near the defendant or the bloodstains. According to Barbara, she was never beaten by John when he was sober. On the night of the murder, John was indeed sober, meaning he most likely did not walk into the room to beat Barbara. Barbara was not acting in self-defense. This was revenge. She was not going to let her husband betray her. The bloodstains depicted in Exhibit 2 show a chase until death. Barbara hunted him down and killed him. As quoted in the charge of the court, if there should have been an interval between the provocation and the killing sufficient for the voice of reason and humanity to be heard, of which in all cases jury shall be the judge, killing shall be attributed to deliberate revenge and be punished as for murder. Now, which one of these scenarios pertains to the case? In her confession, the defendant states he told me he wanted a divorce and that he wanted to marry someone else. The victim told this to her before dinner. Lee Porter claims that as Barbara left the dinner table to go into the living room, she heard Barbara say, "You'll be sorry," to John. After dinner, after a more than substantial period of time had passed, the defendant took action, taking her thought-out revenge. She acted clearly with malice aforethought. We have proven Barbara's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt, it's not a mathematical certainty. Moral and reasonable certainty is all that can be expected in a legal investigation. A reasonable doubt means just what it says. It is a doubt of a fair-minded, impartial juror, honestly seeking the truth. It is a doubt based upon common sense and reason. It does not mean a vague or arbitrary notion, but it is a doubt for which a reason can be given. A reason that can be given from a consideration of the evidence. We have presented the truth to you today. As Americans, we must ensure that justice is brought upon those who break the law. Murder is a serious crime. John Barrett's life cannot be brought back. So, when and where were you? When and where are you? Well, you're here now. This is a crucial moment. You are here with us because of the murder of John Barrett. You were not there to help him on that fateful night. Most of you were asleep. Some of you were working. You weren't there to help him, but you can help him now. You can do the right thing. The power lies in your hands. What are you going to do with it? There's only one way to ensure that the court system, that we know the meaning of justice, declare Barbara Barrett guilty of murder. We have proven beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond any doubt at all, that Barbara Barrett maliciously murdered her husband. Thank you.
Thank you very much, counsel. At this time, I will take all of the evidence and the statements and the arguments into submission and go into recess for 15 minutes or so. And thank you again for all of the hard work that you did.
All right. Round 3 was just completed. Thank you very much, attorneys, for your arguments on this case. And we'll be looking for the jurors to do their evaluations. And then submit them to me via email. It's been going pretty darn well, I would say. Adam, just a quick note, if you could, I sent you a note back on round 2. If you could just check your email on that would be great. Did you hear that? Thank you. And then the judge and I will confer and receive his evaluations as we proceed. So we'll take a 15-minute break. Close out this Zoom meeting, and we will commence with round 4 back in about we got about 10 minutes, so about 2:35, let's say. Let's give them all a good 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Good job, Folsom.